Okay, today's agenda, what is growth hacking? That's what we will start with. Then we'll move on to using growth hacking strategies to grow customers. How do you use these strategies? Then what is the kind of growth hacking team that will be required? Followed by what is the process? What is the growth hacking process? And what are the channels that you can hack on and grow your organization? We'll then moving on to how do you master the funnels? How do you actually, we'll get you familiar with the concept of funnels, and then how do you manage funnels? What are the growth hacking tactics that marketplaces can use and SaaS startups can use? It is actually, there are more options there in terms of segments, but the 2 hours don't allow us enough time. I thought these are the two most important segments to talk about. And then we'll talk about getting the basic foundations of your organization right to drive growth strategy. Very few startups actually focus on this. Their focus is totally on the product. So we'll talk about that. And finally, we'll have a look at what are the growth metrics you will have to constantly keep looking at. Okay, moving on very quickly. Can you guys write down the answers to these equations and put it on the chat? Clearly the one in the middle, 1 raised to power 365 is 1. Rupesh, you are not allowed because you know the answers.
Try others. I know first and third.
Okay, to quickly, if you have written it down.
Hello, Ravi sir, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, you're frozen again. Wait. Right.
I face this problem, like, I am living in an apartment where there is 100% power backup. So whenever power goes off, it trips for at least a minute or two, or whenever it comes back. I thought I was better off earlier when I had an inverter, and for 10 years continuously, I never noticed that if there is a power off and it comes back. Obviously AC trips off, but this kind of thing never happens that you're watching TV and it goes off, or suddenly there is a dark or router went off. So even 100% power backup is not that good. Inverters work better.
Hello?
Yep, you're back.
Sorry, this was not supposed to happen. Okay, share screen. Okay, is the screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think this is where we were, and I was talking about if you don't grow, 365 days later, you'd be where you were. But if you stop growing and you degrow at 0.5% per day, you will be 16% of where you were 1 year ago. But if you grow at 0.5% every day, you will be 600% of where you were a year ago. But if you degrow at 1%, you are ready to shut down. You'll be 3% of what you were, where you were today. However, if you grow at 1% every day, you will be 3,800% bigger than where you were a year ago. So if org was at 100 customers a year ago and you were growing 1% a day, then you would be 380,000 customers today. From 100 customers, you'll move to 380,000 customers if you just grow at 1% per day. This is the fundamental maths of growth hack. You can have drip campaigns adding 1% every day to your customer base, your audience base. And the drip campaign, if it is run regularly, monitored regularly, massaged regularly, you will have phenomenal growth in 1 year's time. This, if you don't remember anything, at least take this one thing away from this workshop today. Growth hack is not chamatkar. Growth hack is a lot of hard work which keeps bringing you incremental gains. Now let's take a deeper look at what is this whole conversation about growth hack. So this is the sign of growth hacking leading to traction. The organization is doing something right, which is then building the traction. So this is a very talked about framework for growth, AARRR funnel. And so here is how it is defined. The first A is acquisition, which is about how do potential customers get to know about us. And then there are various methods you can use: SEO, SEM, social, blog, email, etc., etc. If you do this well, then you have to think about activation. Okay, the customers know. Now, how do you activate these customers? So how do potential customers get to try your product? And how do you do that? You can bring them to homepage, landing page, start talking about product features to them so that they get interested. What I want you to take away from this, that it looks like a process. It's not a transaction. It is not some tactical action you take. And if you do this well, then you have to start thinking, okay, how do I retain this customer? I've got them interested. How do I retain them? So how many potential customers will stick around? You need to figure that out. How will you do this? And options to you are emails, alerts, system events, time-based features, blogs, content. There are various options available to you. What will be relevant for you, you will have to see in your specific situation. And this should lead to revenue. So it is a question of converting those customers, potential customers to customers. So at this stage, you could be doing ads, lead generation, biz dev, subscription, whatever method really works for you. And finally, this is something most entrepreneurs miss. How do you create a referral engine out of your customers? So how many will actually become customers and start referring you to others is a fundamental growth tactic. Again, ad, lead gen, biz dev, multiple such methods work. And what that does is referral automatically brings you more customers. But this is a process. It's not a set of tactical actions. This is something you must remember. So how do you really drive acquisition? There are three engines of growth. If you succeed with any one of these, you can't do all. You'll have to try any, you maybe start experimenting with all three, but then you find out which works for you and start exercising that particular strategy. The first one is virality. And here fundamentally you grow primarily through other people referring you to their friends, families, colleagues. And we'll take some examples and see how this works. So this is Dropbox, right? What did Dropbox do? Initially, it gave you 16 gigabytes of free storage if you recommended the product to your friends. So what this strategy did was it incentivized the Dropbox users to share documents with their service more frequently. and it introduced more people to the brand, giving people who had never heard of them, take a little free sample. And they made referral their activation. If you remember, we said AARRRR is the funnel. They use referral as their key strategy for activation. I'm going to take you through 6 or 7 such cases. What you should start thinking is, how does this apply to you? How can you use a similar strategy? Let's look at the next case. Apple did a beautiful strategy with iPod. Apple made iPod earphones white when every other headphone was black. So every person with an iPod became a walking ad. This one small act of using white earphones created great visibility for Apple. So how you make your ads becomes extremely important. You can create a distinctive position just by making sure how do you advertise your product or how your product looks like. We're working with a very interesting startup called NapEasy, which has made a beautiful product. I mean, the product immediately gets your attention. Anybody using that product will draw attention. That the customer is going to become a walking ad for the company. And this is all about applied psychology. You start thinking about how can you get customers' attention when his mind is preoccupied with 20,000 other things from his daily life. Next case, Hotmail. Hotmail already had about 20,000 users 1 month after launching in 1996. They opted to market their service directly to users, friends, families, colleagues, etc. by employing a very simple strategy. They added a tagline at the bottom, get your free email at Hotmail. At the end of each existing user's outgoing mail, any mail that you sent from Hotmail had this tagline. So if a Hotmail user wrote to 100 people automatically got the message without Hotmail spending a penny. And this is what those customers saw. They got this screen. If they clicked, they got this screen. So you can create strategies which are very simple, don't cost you a penny.
Maybe I have a question here.
Yep.
So if they have received any mail from the person who was using Hotmail, he already had one kind of an email account already. So what is prompting them to go for Hotmail?
So what was happening at that point in time when Hotmail came into existence, there weren't too many people providing you personal email IDs.
Okay.
And Hotmail was and they were not free. Most people like AOL, I think at that point in time used to give you, there was one more company, the name started with C, who used to give you email accounts, but they were subscription based.
Okay.
They were not free. Hotmail was free. So Hotmail's only problem was, how do they get their brand in front of multiple potential customers without spending a penny? So especially in your case, Rupesh, as we are working with you, I have a sense of what you're doing. So we have to figure out with you that how do we get bill free in front of millions of people?
Yeah.
Without spending a penny. And it is doable. Okay, moving on.
Ravi, Jagdish here, just quickly. I mean, this kind of use case is from quite some time back. In the times we live in, you're actually bombarded with a lot. Typically, the first thing you do is probably delete the email or, just unsubscribe if you get unwanted spam. So it's slightly a different world where there is too much.
Jagdish, so point is not the action, point is the underlying strategy, right? So I'll give you a very interesting case from very recent I was planning to share that case, but I couldn't find it in time. So this is the case about a lady who's got she's in US and she's got a home business where she sells organic products. And what she did was she started, so when anybody ordered an organic product from her, she started packing a free organic candy with the product. And when the customer received the product and they opened, candy came as a great surprise. Her candy became more popular than the product. And she got such a huge publicity because of that. She got called on various talk shows. She got such visible publicity because of that one small action. And where did that action come from? That action came from, how will I delight my customer? How will I surprise my customer? So Jagdish, the principle doesn't change. So for example, we are constantly bringing up the principle in red. You will notice that on the red, we will bring out the principle. Leverage your existing user base. What will you do for him that will delight him, excite him, so that he refers you to 10 more people?
Correct. So thanks, Ravi. Yeah, that's the key point. I think, that your engagement or strategy doesn't necessarily need to be digital. You need to think of the context you are in and then apply the strategy. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the fundamental principle is you have to think about leveraging your existing user base. And suppose you have only 100 users. And imagine if every user adds one user once a month. So you're going to get how many more users every one month? You're going to get 100 every month, right? This is like rabbit population. Next month, you're going to get 200 more. Next month, you're going to get, it's just going to multiply.
Right.
And it's the simple formula. If he just gives you one referral a month, 100 becomes 200. Now this is 300. 300 becomes 600. This is, and I am still only on end of second month. So imagine basically it's a binary thing, right? It's getting multiplied by 2.
Right. Thank you, Ravi.
So guys, focus on the red message that comes here. For example, in the previous slide, what is the red message? Create a distinctive position. So no point saying, hey, iPod happened 15 years ago. The fundamental principles don't change. You have to create a distinctive position. Why? Because our minds have become even more preoccupied. You have to break my preoccupation. You have to get my attention. Only then will I engage with your brand. So leverage your existing user base. Let's move on. PayPal, very interesting strategy. So PayPal used what we call fake it till you make it. So PayPal was founded in 1998. Then they realized that eBay is a great place to find people who can use our platform. So they identified an ecosystem where they can go. And what did they do? They did a very interesting thing. So they pretended to be buyers, but they insisted on paying through PayPal. And they created a technology that where, they would put in a bid for product, but they would say payment through PayPal. And they created a bot to do this. So automatically a bot was working and doing this. So seeing the increasing popularity of PayPal because of this, eBay sellers began offering PayPal as an option so that they didn't miss out on sales. And PayPal never looked back. I mean, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, this is that PayPal gang which has become astoundingly rich because of PayPal.
PayPal Mafia.
PayPal Mafia, right. So fake it till you make it. Applied psychology. They created fear of missing out. Is it ethical? Is it not ethical? I think there's a very fine borderline. It is not illegal. They had a playing platform and they said, okay, we will buy provided you accept payment from this platform. And I'm sure they would have gone through some purchases also. So please focus on the red message that keeps coming up with every example. Facebook, very interesting strategy. The reason I'm taking these big names is which by the very nature that they are big will be dated. These are companies that have started in the last decade. What did Facebook do? Facebook had a contained network versus free for all. You had Friendster at that time, MySpace at that time, which were free for all. Anybody could come on. But Facebook kept a very high quality network, which was contained, which was limited, which was private. Not everybody could get onto it. It was limited to colleges, but they kept expanding college by college by college. And the fact that it was a closed network made it seem exclusive, increasing people's appetite for being part of it. Again, fear of missing out. And this really requires you to step away from being an engineer and start thinking about human psychology. How do people behave? What will make people respond? And here, exclusivity and controlled growth worked for Facebook. As a consequence, what happened was the nature of relationships getting formed at that point in time, the friend circle getting formed at that point in time was really very rich. It's only when Facebook opened to general public, the character of Facebook changed. So they got their initial kick up of numbers through this strategy: exclusivity, controlled growth. Twitter, very interesting example. So in early days, I don't know how many of you remember Twitter when it came out. So people would go to Twitter, but it was very difficult to retain customers for Twitter. And they had to really solve this problem. They actually solved two problems. They solved getting their initial numbers, which we'll take up later. How did they do it? And they solved the problem of stickiness through a different strategy. So rather than investing in standard retargeting ads, email newsletter, the company attempted to figure out what it was that separated those who kept coming back and those who joined and never returned. And what their data research found, data analytics found, was that following at least 5 to 10 accounts resulted in much higher likelihood of engagement. If somebody was following 5 to 10 accounts, he would keep coming back. Twitter rebuilt the entire user experience to encourage following others. And the positive impact of just this one action was phenomenal and immediate. So what's the underlying principle? Improve user experience after customer segmentation and sharp focus. Wherever you see you're getting traction, forget the guys who are not giving you traction. Customer centricity, customer value. This is coming from there. They figured out, okay, which customer is getting what value, and this completely focused on that customer. And their numbers grew. Airbnb. What did Airbnb do different? What they did was, when they were starting, they allowed anybody who wanted to publish his rental space do a cross posting to Craigslist in one click. So you could make your ad, and there's a button, as you see the button here, post to Craigslist. So if you clicked, your ad also went on to Craigslist, and Craigslist was big at that point in time. So what did they do? They leveraged an existing community to build visibility, and posting to Craigslist was free. There are some similarities between what Airbnb did and what PayPal had done. PayPal found eBay as its potential domain where they wanted to build customers. Airbnb found Craigslist as their potential domain. So leverage some existing community. So Craigslist was already well-established user base that not only allowed Airbnb to get their name in front of ads, so their brand was getting advertised. Second, their customers were getting more opportunities. And newer customers were coming on because those guys who saw it on Craigslist started using Airbnb. So what is the underlying strategy? Find out communities where your customers exist and leverage those communities. Leverage it in a manner so that you don't have to spend too much money. And guys, there are enough stories on the net. If you go read up about how have companies done growth hacking, what made them successful, you will find these underlying principles that companies have applied. Pinterest, again, very interesting strategy. So Pinterest was only by invite. And anyone who requested, anyone was free to request for invitation. But then they would send a mail that, okay, our waiting list is very long and we'll allow you soon. Actually, Google also did the same thing when they announced Gmail. You could not directly make a Google account. Somebody had, initially they sent out some limited invitations. And then somebody had to recommend you to Google. Why did they do that? They wanted to make sure that Google never gets fake accounts. They had validated a certain number of accounts and then they said, okay, if this person recommends you, we'll give you a Google account. Again, the Facebook strategy is very similar. That is, build controlled, very clean communities by invitation only or by recommendation. So exclusivity again becomes a big factor. So you have to start looking at these principles and start seeing what is relevant for you. What can you leverage for your organization? Okay, next thing. So the next engine is, how do you create stickiness? Think WhatsApp, think Facebook. You create an irresistible experience that people keep coming around as long as possible. And fundamental principle is, if the rate of new customer acquisition exceeds the churn rate, the product will grow. So these are the metrics you'll keep an eye on. So let us say every day you're adding 10% customers and your 9% are going. Remember that 1% rule? You're adding 1%. In 1 year, you'll be 3,800% times what you are today. And then there is a paid strategy. If nothing else works for you, this is a challenge for companies which are not either software companies or SaaS companies. They need to figure out how to actually pay to get customers. And one very interesting example is Groupon. Groupon was going to go public, and they didn't have enough customers in their ecosystem. And they've spent $179 million to acquire 33 million new customers in 1 quarter before they went public. So what is the rule here? Spend ad money to build customer lifetime value, not to just get customer, build lifetime value. Why? Because when they spent, if I divide this, roughly they spent something like $6 per customer. But if that customer is going to give them $500 worth of business over the year, they've recovered, more than recovered. All they need to do is recover $6 from that customer in a year, and the money is back. So you can put money upfront to see if a customer is going to give you more than what you're investing today in terms of the lifetime value he gives you in 1 year. GoDaddy does this very beautifully. If you go see GoDaddy's pricing strategies, you will start getting a sense of how companies can actually leverage this. You give up some money upfront, or you give something free, but you then create an engagement which persuades that person to spend some money down the road. So each of these 3 engines can work for acquisition. But which one will be relevant for you? Which one that will really depend on your business. There is no universality to this. It is very specific to your business, and what underlying viral strategy will you apply? What kind of stickiness you will drive, or paid campaigns you should do, depends on your company. You have to think about that. Don't blindly put money into any one activity. So building a deep understanding and understanding the true nature of your business becomes very critical. And we will be spending some time on how can you do that. Okay, now let's understand growth hacking team. Sudeep, any questions so far?
Sir, there's a question from Zafar.
Yep.
Zafar, do you want to come on the mic and talk about it? The methods in here are to acquire customers, which are B2C model. My plan is to acquire and grow in B2B. I can't export products to customers. I have to export to existing businessmen.
Export meaning? Zafar, can you come online?
Not in a condition to talk.
Okay, so when we'll
Hello?
have to know his business. Yeah, hi Zafar.
So it's export-import business.
What do you export? What do you import?
I have not started yet, but I will start it very soon by 2021. So
What will
currently
it
I'm
be
on a
in?
research. It would be immersion rods, food products, and anything. Mostly immersion rods and electrical appliances.
Okay, immersion rods and electrical appliances. Since you're mentioning immersion rods, clearly you've seen potential for immersion rods somewhere, and that's why you're working on it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And so, Zafar, the best way to do this is start writing down what is the problem you have to solve. What is the key issue that is facing? What is the, so let's say, for example, you have data by country.
Okay.
On consumption of immersion rods and pricing information in those countries for that product. Now the question is how, so this is basic data that you will need, right?
Exactly.
Now the next thing, and this will come up later in the workshop, is how are you going to differentiate yourself? So the customer says, I want this immersion rod and not that immersion rod. Now the other thing is we have to figure that out is, are you going to work with distributors or are you going to work with end customers?
If you're I'm going to work with the distributors, like who are the already existing businessmen.
Correct. So now the strategy changes because your strategy with end consumer and your strategy with distributors would be very different.
Yeah, exactly.
So but the core is going to be, how are you going to be different for them? So for example, especially in distribution network, more than price, distributors are worried about quality, availability, and timeliness, because see, immersion rod sales will be seasonal. They will not be around the year. And if they miss, suppose you don't supply in time, they will miss their business. Zafar, you're saying something?
No, I'm listening to you.
Or let's say you give them a container full of immersion rods where quality is an issue. They're not going to buy next season from you because they will undergo loss. They will lose the season.
Okay.
So therefore, customer centricity, customer value is the underlying strategy that you must leverage. And you have to start thinking about, okay, what constitutes value for my customer? What do I need to do to be customer centric, that my customer feels that Zafar will do anything to make me successful? Okay. So at this stage, without getting into the details of your business, this is the high level strategy I can probably suggest to you, that this is what you should try and follow.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, moving on. So first of all, let's take a pause here and understand. So growth hacking is not something that you wake up one day and start doing and you do and then there is chamatkar. It's not a magic wand. It's a process driven by strategy and it will take time to show results. But there are various methods of doing it. There are underlying strategies you'll have to think about to create a growth hacking. And it is not your normal digital marketing operation. That should be clear to you. So let's try to see what kind of team, skills, capabilities you'll need to build a growth hacking strategy. The first thing you'll need is coding and automation capability, because it will involve a lot of coding and a lot of automation. Those of you who have been receiving emails from us would see that how you got emails from us a month and a half back and how you're getting emails from us is very different now. Because over the last month and a half, we are moving towards complete automation of our emails. And depending on what you did with your first email, the second email automatically gets defined. What kind of second email will come to you? And depending on every stages, what you do with an email, the next email will be very different. It will be very specific because the whole process has been thought through and there is a team sitting out there and coding the whole email workflow. And this is fundamental. If you don't do this, you'll end up doing a lot of work manually and it will completely sink you. The next thing that you will have to do is data analytics and testing. Keep analyzing data, keep figuring out what that strategy is doing and keep testing different strategies so that you get to that 1% rule. What is going to give you 1% growth every day or 0.5% growth every day? The third thing you'll have to focus on is creative marketing. It is not your regular digital marketing. You have to constantly be creative. Like PayPal was very creative. They knew they have to go to eBay. They knew they have a payment platform. They pretended to be buyers and insisted that you have to accept money from PayPal. That's creative marketing. You'll have to really think it through. This is not conventional marketing. Or what Pinterest did, or what Facebook did. These are not conventional marketing. So don't go to your digital marketing outsourced company and say, hey, create a growth hacking strategy. Not going to work. Fourth, you will have to build an understanding of behavioral economics and applied psychology. So you don't have to go sign up for these courses, but you have to study how campaigns work. What do people respond to? How do they respond and learn from that? On our other workshops, we share ads where we show you how a particular strategy has been used. If you want to learn about that, you should attend our early stage marketing, go-to-marketing strategy for early stage startups. And customer acquisition. Customer acquisition is more on funnel, but early stage marketing is more on tactics. So if you understand behavioral economics, applied psychology, and you're using coding and automation, so your entire coding effort will be retaining customers. How do you build strategies that will help retain customers? Whereas creative marketing is about acquisition. How will you acquire customers? So how do you market yourself in this digital world? Instead of being conventional, how can you be unconventional and get customers at minimum possible budget? And then how do you use this data for taking informed decisions? So for example, I recently saw a very interesting case where I went to a website and they asked me to sign up for a mailing list. And the moment I clicked on sign up, it immediately brought up a sign up screen with a spinning wheel to try my luck to earn money. And if you click play now, so it's not submit, it's play now. When you say play now, the wheel spins and it'll come with some discount. In my case, it came up with $300 discount. And it showed up $300 discount. And if I wanted to encash that $300 discount, it took me to something that would sign up for, which is $400, on which they give me $300 discount. But what did they do? They just gamified the entire boring process of registering for a mailing list. You will have to think like this. What will engage the customer into doing what you want him to do? And you'll try a strategy, you'll measure data. So for example, you try 2 or 3 strategies and then you measure what did it cost me, what effort, and then what is the kind of clicks I got through, how many people actually signed. You'll have to look at those numbers. So data analytics and testing becomes a key part. These are the 4 key activities you'll have to do to make a successful growth hacking strategy. So understanding online behavior becomes an important part. These are the 4 key capabilities you should have within your team. Marketing in the digital world, retention-driven development, understanding online behavior, and using data for informed action. So for creative marketing, you will do technical hacks for which you'll need crazy marketing ideas and coders. For behavioral economics, and you might want to improve your UX, which will again need coding. So technical hacks and UX improvements become 2 key activities that you will have to do. Creative marketing and data analytics is going to give you what are your growth metrics and what KPI measurements will you build. And how do you make sure that you're actually achieving your goal? You'll measure your conversion rates at each stage. How many conversion rate, what is the conversion you're getting at each stage? I think one thing I want you to take away is that how elaborate the growth hacking strategy has to be. It is not something you wake up one day, say, okay, I'm going to do growth hacking. Let me go to the net. Let's see what this guy did. I will do this. It doesn't work that way. Creative marketing, win big battles with small budgets. That should be your goal. Coding automation, craft with hand first. Try it manually first. And then tell your coder to automate it. Write the code and automate it. You may want to add a widget to somebody's website or somebody's mail. There should be somebody who should be able to do that for you. Understanding customer behavior and designing KPIs accordingly becomes an important requirement. Know your customer, focus on the main KPI. What are my main KPIs to know my customer? This is the kind of growth hacking team, the skills and capabilities you will need to drive growth hacking. So if some of you are disappointed, I'm sorry, I can't tell you something else. It is not magic, it is hard work. It is not conventional promotion. It is very different from conventional promotion. What is the growth hacking process? Get your team together, generate ideas. Therefore, your team must really understand the nature of your business very well. Without that, this is not going to happen. Analyze, get a bunch of ideas together and analyze, prioritize, and select 2 or 3 ideas to test, not more than 2 or 3. Start with the best sounding idea and create a success hypothesis that this is how I define that I have succeeded. So you could say, my goal is that my day-to-day audience must increase by 0.5%. So you defined a goal and you define, okay, in order to do this, your hypothesis says, if I do this, this goal will be achieved. Now you have to test that hypothesis. So you start measuring outcomes and check against your goals. Okay, whatever I decided, whatever hypothesis I made, is it working? Is it getting me the numbers that I wanted to get? So analyze, gain insights, validate hypotheses, modify your goals, and again, get with your team together and talk about it, think about it, generate it. It's a constant improvement cycle. You will try multiple strategies before you actually find one that works for you. It's a journey. And it should start from the time you think of starting a startup. This is the extension of Dave McClure's model, where he actually shows you, so there are 19 possible channels which you can use. And these are the channels which I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to basically give you gyan. We are planning one more session on growth hacking strategies where we will go into detail of each of these channels. Again, with examples, with use cases where you can take something out of it. And then retention, which is acquisition, which is really about product features, your service features, your product features, but you have to find very interesting ways of talking about it. And then through blog and content, drive retention. Because just telling him about product, and he may not buy today, he may just buy after 6 months, but what are you going to do for next 6 months? Keep him engaged through retention, through blogs, through content, largely through that. It could be emails and alerts. We have subscribed to GoDaddy for domain, and they keep throwing these offers at me every once in a week, every once in a 14 days. It's automated. Nobody's sitting there and sending it. It's automated. They've figured out their email workflows and they've automated it. And then referrals from your customers, converting retained potential customers through ads, lead gen, subscriptions, offers, and then using them for referrals. Again, emails, widgets, campaigns, contests, you can do multiple things. at a very high level, this is what Dave McClure's AA RRRR framework is all about. Okay, moving on. Now that's a lot of channels. You can't work on all those channels and it gets really confusing. What do you do? So here is a very simple framework which Gabriel Weinberg, this is the person who actually created DuckDuckGo. I don't know how many of you are familiar with DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is a private search engine which prevents sites from tracking you. I personally use DuckDuckGo and my experience is great. The number of ads now I see has dropped drastically. So Gabriel Weinberg lists 19 channels that you can use. And what he suggests is using the framework, define top 3 channels and set goals. Put this in the center of this bullseye. These are your most promising channels. So focus on them first. Then write your next 6 in the middle layer. Okay, after these 3, these are the next 6 channels you will look at. But it is after, not simultaneously. And long shots go into the outer circle. You will think about them when you've tried everything else. So all 19 channels should be categorized. That is one-time thinking you have to do. Then cross out the ones you've already used and not succeeded with, and you're sure that this is not going to work for you. So for example, in case of Zafar, I don't know whether emails will be successful beyond a point. Maybe for him, it's a question of getting lists of these distributors and calling or writing really personalized mails where it immediately gets your potential customer's attention. So after you've done this, repeat after testing the channels. You tested it, then go back to the same thing. Write the 3 best in the center and move out to others to the middle layer and others to the outer layer, till you hit that combination of 3 channels that work best for you and pick the one which is the best. Get focused. Don't do too many things. And you can come to us for help. If you are stuck, come to us for help. We'll work with you. We'll help you figure it out what works for you, what will work for you. So both AARRR and Bullseye frameworks work and are effective. However, creating great funnels and automating them requires a greater level of depth. So I would say that Dave McClure's framework is a high-level guidance. You will have to do deeper work on funnels. So we have developed funnel frameworks in Bulletproof Your Startup that I'm going to share with you. We covered that in greater details in customer acquisition and go-to-market strategy for early stage startups. You can go see one of the recordings or whenever we have a session, live session, you can come and attend that. We have almost all of these workshops available on our YouTube channel. I'll quickly take you through our frameworks as well so that you understand the level of detailing you will have to do when you look at funnels. So largely, according to us, all promotions, those 19 channels, you'll be doing these 6 activities. And the first thing that you have to do is, in any funnel, you have to be clear about what is your business about. So that your first communication to your customer is, so for example, when Rupesh introduced himself, he said, we are a marketing analytics company that helps customers acquire, retain, engage and retain customers. Very clear. What is this business all about? One line, he's very clearly told us, this is what we do. Post that, you have to create brand awareness. Okay, fine, you're doing marketing analytics, but can I trust you? And this funnel is not specific to advertising. This funnel is to how do you actually create your marketing brochures? How do you talk to the customer? So if I ask this question of Rupesh, how do I trust you? So Rupesh is going to tell me, hey, I'm already in 2,000 merchants. I have 1 million customers on my consumers on my platform who have bought through this platform, and they have carried out 4 million transactions. Now, see, now he's telling me about why I should trust him. Now, if he's made me aware and he's helped me trust him, then his next thing I'm going to ask him, okay, what is it that you do? Now, this is a question about value proposition. So these three things must happen. This is what Dave McClure refers to as acquisition. But that acquisition at a greater level will break into these three things. So once you've done that, now once, let's say I've heard about Rupesh's product, then he has to engage me. I may just go away. If he doesn't engage me, it doesn't get over till I actually place an order. And he has to generate interest. Now he could do case studies, he could share how similar merchants have gained, so that he starts influencing me. This is activation. I'm actually converting you from somebody who was inquiring about my product into somebody who's now interested in buying my product. And then this needs to be converted into a sales lead. So this is the marketing funnel. There is a sales funnel also, and let's look at that. For each of these stages, you have to create and test scripts for each of these stages because you want to achieve a specific purpose at that stage. So whether it's your biz dev team who's going to talk to customers, whether it's your campaign that you're going to design, whether it's the brochures you're going to design, it pretty much follows the same path. Sales funnel. Now let's say you generated some leads. Now you have to establish intent. The customer saying, yes, I'm interested, but I have to now establish intent. Okay, you're interested, but are you now intending to buy? Those who are actually intending to buy become sales qualified leads. From leads, now I have sales qualified leads. And then I help you evaluate options. What options do you have? What features should you turn on, turn off? I'm helping you understand options. That gives me actual prospects. These are people, when I explained the option, they said, yes, I am interested. So because they have said I'm interested, now I'm going to give a quote. And then after that, they become potential customers. And then I drive purchase, which is when they become customers. And then I have to nurture these customers. I shouldn't just walk away. Typically, I have found most Indian entrepreneurs spend zero effort on nurturing the customer. So the first two stages are retention as per Dave McClure's framework. And this is revenue, quote, proposal, purchase, where you can actually then start doing and nurture, which is really referrals. So you remarket, you create referrals. But again, for each stage, you will have to create scripts. Create and test scripts and see if it is working. If you use this training methodology with your teams, you will at least ensure that they are giving you the kind of conversion rates you want at each stage of the funnel. So what you saw in Dave McClure's funnel, which is AARRR, this is the next level of detailing that we do at BYS so that you actually can build great funnels. Let us now look at growth hacking strategies for segments. Growth hacking for marketplaces. So marketplaces by their very nature tend to grow faster than most other companies. But marketplaces are rewarding, but they're very hard to build. They're not easy because there are two sides. There are consumers. For example, Amazon is a marketplace. So there are vendors, there is Amazon, and then there are consumers. So you have to figure out value proposition for both sides. And both need to be on the platform. You can't have just one, because if you get in vendors, they're going to ask you for consumers. If you get in consumers, they're going to ask you for product options. So you have to figure out how do you build both together. So typically the underlying strategy used is by providing an alternate bait to one of the sites so that they start joining your platform. Once one side is seeded, it acts as a bait for other side to come on board. So for example, in case of Amazon, the way they positioned the platform when they started was for publishers that, hey, you can now get your books online and sell to another segment without having to pass on such huge margins that you pass on to booksellers. That was the bait, the alternative bait. So you have to start thinking about, okay, which side will you provide bait for? So for example, if you look at those of you who are interested in interior decoration, there is a site called houzz.com, HAHOUZZ.com. So they kept driving content for almost first 6-7 years about interiors, photographs, and they built a user base, a consumer base. They started monetizing Houzz only year and a half late, previous, by actually now bringing in options of buying. So they first created the marketplace through content by bringing in users. Now they brought in vendors and they have monetized the platform. So this is the fundamental of marketplace that you have to remember. Let us look at some marketplaces and see what they did. So TikTok is one of the most amazing growth stories. And the reason TikTok became successful was a very interesting hack. Actually, TikTok gained the US market by acquiring a company called Musical.ly. TikTok was already big in China. And in China, the nature of app was different. It was in-app purchases that actually makes Chinese apps very, very popular. But what Musical.ly did was that at that point in time, the app ranking used to happen on the basis of the name of the app and not description. So the fact that Musical.ly gave it a long name, the name was an app for creating short-term videos for Instagram, Messenger, and more. The App Store gave it more weight because of the name. And it started listing on top of the apps. This hack got them ranked at top of the App Store and their first set of downloads. And they positioned it as a tool or a utility. It was a voiceover app. And they did not focus on building community on day one. They just said, okay, here's a tool where you can do voiceover apps, voiceover on music. And that made it popular. The founders repositioned it much later. What they did was they started building the brand by putting the person's name into the video. And then they would, when someone would share it on Instagram or other social platform, their viewers would see Musical.ly name and then they would see these lip sync videos and they would probably go and explore Musical.ly. So they used that strategy to build users. Finally, TikTok bought this company at a huge valuation, I think $1 billion. And that is what helped TikTok grow outside China. Okay, Quora. So founders, initial employees, and their friends who shared common interests in programming, startups, Silicon Valley, etc., answered the first set of Q&A. So that is how they did it. They created, and they chose a very, very specific community. There was an advantage that Adam D'Angelo was former CTO of Facebook, and their personal brand was very high. So they were getting influencers very, very quickly. But even people like Angelo had to have a strategy, which is they started writing questions and answers themselves between friends, and they kept the group very focused till they built volume. And then they linked to other social networking accounts to help circulate activities to followers. Then Quora got visibility. Quora got visibility in press. Press visibility is extremely important, guys. You should, the moment somebody wants to interview you, jump on it. It doesn't matter how big, small that magazine or platform might be. Find yourself and get yourself published on Mashup, Your Story, Inc. 42, wherever you get an opportunity. And Quora remained invite only for a very long time. So again, you see, remember that Facebook strategy, make it very specific so that the quality of the platform becomes very good. And initially Quora was fantastic. Now, because they've opened it up, the quality of Quora question answers has really dropped. So the proper choice of initial users caused spammers to keep out, and the quality of the content was phenomenal. Reddit, a very interesting case. Again, fake it till you make it. Initially seeded with fake profiles posting links to simulate activity. All the content was submitted by co-founders at first and then a couple of friends. And then they wrote a special submit page, which automatically would create accounts and submit. So again, tech, not very different from what PayPal did. And here's something that they did, which I don't know how good or bad it was, but they created a subreddit called NSFW, where they started actually posting links from porn websites. And it got them huge traffic. And this subreddit still contributes 10% of their traffic. So fundamentally, the strategy used here was use anything, any domain, any user community to get numbers on your platform. And Reddit's strategy from Quora compared to Quora was very different. Reddit wanted as many people posting links. Therefore, quality of posts somewhere sometimes really gets very questionable. And then Reddit has a lot of aggression on the website. I mean, there are a lot of people who will jump on you and really troll you. They also gamified initially. You could earn karma points by submitting content on the site. Twitter, now very interesting. How did Twitter start? Twitter started by participating in a festival in 2007, South by Southwest. They put up 260-inch plasma screens in the conference hallways, exclusively streaming Twitter messages. So hundreds of attendees kept tabs on each other by constantly tweeting their status. And they would come to these displays and see what were their friends doing, where they were. So speakers, panelists, bloggers started mentioning Twitter. The buzz created about this new thing called microblogging got them the initial customers. And usage went up from 20,000 tweets per day to 60,000 tweets per day just because of this one event. But look at the thinking that went behind it. See how they planned it, putting those plasma displays, allowing people to tweet their status, constantly displaying the information. This is not something that where the founder woke up one day and said, hey, let's go to South by Southwest and do it. They had planned it out. It's the same way Airbnb grew. They've actually gained a kick up when they went to a specific city where apartments were actually not available because there were a lot of conferences happening. And that's where they launched Airbnb. Okay, Discord, another very interesting site. Discord started talking about the site in gaming subreddits because gaming communities are large. And Discord is nothing but private group chats where your identity is hidden. So this provided the first wave of growth because gaming community picked them up because gaming community needed a reliable chat session where they could talk about how they're playing, what are they doing, so that their followers could actually chat with them there. And their options at that time were not very convenient. They were using other platforms which were not very successful. They also integrated with Twitch, which was a live streaming platform for gamers. So any gamer playing on Twitch used Discord for chatting with his followers. And options at that time was Skype and TeamSpeak, which were not very stable, not protected, because there could be DoD attacks on those groups so that chatters could not chat smoothly. So Discord was a far more secure platform, and that gave Discord the success. Okay, growth hack for SaaS startups. Look at the link. I'm not going to go into details. This is a very good article you should read if you have a startup. It gives you what you need to do in pre-launch and what do you need to do post-launch. And I'm going to wait here. You can look at the link, copy it down, take a photo, take a screenshot, whatever you want to do. Okay, moving on. So in summary, somebody has a question?
Yeah, Jennifer had a question, sir. Jennifer, you want to come on the mic and talk about it? Hello, Jennifer. So she says she's the managing director of Pearl Thoughts software company, and it's a software startup company developing web applications for overseas customers. How could we market our services?
Jennifer, there's so many people doing something that you're already doing, right? So again, it becomes a question of building a very sharp customer segment focus. What segment are you focusing? So look at the people you've done work for. And I don't know how long you've been doing this, how deep your customer base is, what was their experience. So therefore, I'm going to give you very high level advice. We can discuss offline and see, can we give you even deeper, better advice? But at this point in time, I would go back to my customer database, and see which segments I have been successful in. And I would have a conversation with those customers and check out with them, what did they like about you and what didn't they like about you? I would also look at customers who gave you work but didn't come back. Pick up the phone, talk to them, find out why didn't they come back to you. So once you start doing this exercise, you will start figuring out what are those customer segments where you are more successful. And then multiple options will start coming out. Referral could be one, industry databases could be second. You could get agents who work in those segments, who could get you clients. There are multiple options that one can work on. I also don't know how big you are, how much money can you afford to promote yourself. So those questions will be open, but I think your answers is going to come from your customer base. And you are in a very crowded field. Hope that answers your question, Jennifer.
Yeah, we can move on, sir.
Okay. So in summary, it is a process, not an outcome. This whole growth hacking, it's a process. It's not something that you wake up one morning, do, and there's an outcome. Not going to happen. And remember, you have very little control over outcomes, but you can have complete control over the process. You can see what's not working in the process, fix it so that it starts delivering what you need to deliver. And because it's a process, you've never worked like this, so it will push you outside your comfort zone. So be prepared for that. There are going to be a lot of heartburns initially. But once you get used to it, it will give you fantastic results. And it makes your success repeatable. Once you've got a process, you can keep fine-tuning it, you can keep making it better, you can keep seeing, okay, what next to do. It is not instant karma, but long-term coaching and automation-driven, unorthodox marketing activity that requires specialist teams and skills. It is not your regular digital marketing per se. Then identifying existing communities that you can leverage and how will you be different is the fundamental key. Because somebody's already created a community. And you figure out of all those communities, which makes maximum sense for you, where your customer profile matches that, that particular community. So if you need gamers, go to gamers communities. If you need techies, go to Reddit. Reddit is really huge on techies. So there are phenomenal amount of options available to you in terms of what communities to leverage. But for that, you must have a really deep understanding of your own business. Without that, you will not succeed. This is not what you have learned all your life. कि चलो कुछ करते हैं, चलो product बनाते हैं. Okay, let me now advertise on digital platform. It is not about doing. It is about a lot of thinking, analyzing, planning, and then executing. And find that one distribution channel that works for you, the most important thing to discover. And just go after that one channel. You don't have to go to any other channel. As long as you fit in that 1% rule, that you grow by 1%, 0.5% every day. I found this quote very important, very interesting. So I want to read this to you. This is from Peter Thiel, who is one of the PayPal founders. an early Facebook investor. Here's what he says. You probably won't have a bunch of equally good distribution strategies. Engineers frequently fall victim to this because they do not understand distribution. Since they don't know what works and haven't thought about it, they keep trying sales, BD, advertising, and viral marketing, everything but the kitchen sink. That is a really bad idea. It is very likely that one channel is optimal. Most businesses actually get 0 distribution channels to work because of this spread out strategy. So it is poor distribution, not poor product. That is the #1 cause of failure. If you can get even a single distribution channel to work, you've got great business. PayPal got eBay payment methodology to work for them. And they never looked back after that. And if you end up trying several channels but don't nail any one, you're finished. So it's worth thinking really hard about and finding the best single distribution channel. This is the best advice anybody could have given you. So getting the basics in place. What do you need to get basics in place? What basics? So how well do you understand the business you are in? Who are your initial set of customers and what are they looking for? What is the key to success, product or the problem customer is facing? What is the nature and seriousness of problem the customer is facing that you are addressing, or how feature rich is the product? This is the reason we put these questions there is this is one big mistake most entrepreneurs make. They get carried away with their product. We have a couple of startups here where we've worked with them, we've coached them, and we've made them look at this question where they've walked away from the product and started thinking about whose problem are they solving and what is the nature of the problem. And it completely changes how you look at your business. So the next question you have to figure out, how will you be different? What's great about you? And by you, we don't mean you specifically, we mean your business. What will be different about the business? For that, it's very necessary to understand what a startup is. Because if you don't understand that, you will not get this right. So as per Government of India, startup is any entity that is 5 years from date of incorporation, has turnover not exceeding 25 crores in last 5 financial years. However, the key statement is it should be innovating, developing, deploying, and commercializing new products, process, or service driven by technology or intellectual property. To this, we have added our own qualification, or it could be about opening new geographies and new customer segments. So what Amazon did with book selling in US, Flipkart did it in India. Same business, different geography, different customer segment. So therefore, critical questions for you to answer to establish value is, what will you be innovating? You must have very clear answer to this. Is it a product or a service? Is it the prevailing business model, or is it a business process? So if you think about what have Uber or what have Redbus innovated, they've innovated the business process. One has innovated the process of how do you book and get a cab and travel in a cab. The second is innovated, how do you get a bus ticket, interstate bus ticket? Or you could innovate the revenue model. What will it be driven by? New technology or intellectual property? And will it be new market segments and geographies? I think Geo is the only example I've seen where they've done all this. They innovated the service, they've innovated technology, it's a new technology, they've gone into new market segments, they've done everything that was required to do to build value. But another thing that you must remember while you're answering these questions from day one, when you decide to do something, these are the 5 basic frameworks you must use. Define your business strategy, define your financial strategy, your go-to-market strategy, your revenue model, and your business model. And unless you've done that, you will not be able to figure out your growth hacking strategy. And this would actually lead to formation of your business plan. The more you think about these 5 things, the deeper and clearer and cleaner your business plan will get. So the question about how will you be different becomes important. So will you truly disrupt the market? Uber disrupted the market. Redbus disrupted the market because what does disruption mean here? It changed the way people were doing things. That is disruption. So companies like Food Panda, Zomato, Book My Show, these were all disruptors. But everybody else who followed probably just made sustainable improvement and tried to compete. But sustainable improvements are not long-term. You can't maintain them for long-term. And therefore, it becomes important for you to constantly keep innovating. Or you could just be driving efficiency in the market. So clearly, if you're driving efficiency in the market, and there's nothing really different about you're not innovating anything new, you're not a startup. And it will be difficult for you to differentiate yourself. So clarity about what is your company really all about becomes very important. There is something very interesting Elon Musk has said. If your only defense against invading armies is a moat, you will not last long. What matters is the pace of innovation. That is fundamental determinant of competitiveness. And if you look at Tesla, he hasn't stopped innovating. He keeps innovating, even though initial launch of Tesla was very successful. In Bulletproof Your Startup, we have a very different definition, and it's from funding perspective, because a lot of startups build their plans expecting to get funded, and a very small percentage actually gets funded. So here's what we would like you to do. Please print this out somewhere and record, stick it on the wall so that you're reminded every day about it. And stop calling it a startup, call it a business. It's a business with uncertain future. Because the moment you call it startup is very glamorous. When you tell somebody, oh, I'm doing a startup, there is an aha moment there, right? And you also get a kick. And the person who's hearing you gets that look of awe and is, looking up. Wow, this guy's he's a startup entrepreneur. But guys, it's really a business with uncertain future. That is the reality. That is why 95% startups fail. And you are setting it up for addressing a problem a customer is facing. It is not about your product. Your product doesn't matter. Even if you have a bunch of monkeys sitting behind the walls and solving a problem that is critical, your customer is not going to care. So the first focus has to be addressing a problem that customer is facing. And where is he facing that problem? In a job he's attempting to do. Without a job, there will be no problem to solve. And you're going to solve that problem in a manner no one has solved earlier. Otherwise, where is the innovation? You're not different. Based on a set of hypotheses about how you're going to address that problem. You have a set of hypotheses. Why are those hypotheses? Because nobody has tried it earlier. So therefore, there is no data out there telling you, yes, this will succeed. That yes, you will find customers. Yes, it will be better. You don't know. And if all this has been correctly framed, and if you end up solving the problems successfully within a defined business model, there has to be a business model. You have to have a way of making money. After that, it should have the if you want to get funded, it should have the possibility of generating humongous future profits, because that is what will drive valuation. That is what will get you funded. This is the first framework we apply for any startup we work with. This is how he has to define his business. So therefore, what is the must-have ideas filter based on whatever we have learned? Create a compelling breakthrough opportunity. Because without that, you don't have something that will create humongous future profits. And it has to be either disruptive innovation, disruptive business model, or defensible technology, one of those things. Pick up a big fight, because small fight is just as much work. Don't get into niche markets if you want to make a company that will be valued very highly and will get funded deeply. You can pick up a small fight and still be a successful business. Nothing wrong with that. So you'll have to align your personal aspirations with the kind of business you're building. Big problems will lead to big opportunities. They can become game changers. Create a large, sticky community. Because if these three things are not happening, you don't have anything to hack for growth. You'll waste your money and time. So creating a differentiated opportunity where then you explore how do you quickly grow communities. If it's not a big fight, you will not be able to create big communities. If it's not a sticky community, you will not be able to create big communities. If you don't have a compelling breakthrough opportunity, you will not be able to attract audience. These are three fundamental things you will have to have in place for growth hacking to be successful. What will really drive traction? I'm going back to acquisition stage. Are you serving a latent critical need? So we have a need analysis framework. I'll be actually coming to that slide and refer to it quickly. What is the nature of problem you are solving? So these are the things which will help you understand your company. What are you really doing? How is it valuable to the customer? Will it be customers? How will it drive customer centricity? Whatever we are doing. Or you're just automating a task or making it more efficient. Then pricing strategy. How will you price your product or your service? Will you compete with the incumbents? Because there are a lot of people out there, then you have to figure out how do you compete? Will you enter bottom of the market? Or you will go to geographies where there is no competition, compete with non-consumption. Basically, what you have to persuade is a new set of customers to start consuming your service. How does all this impact growth?
So would you like to take a question here?
Yeah, sure.
Manutosh, you had a question. Would you like to come on mic and talk about it? Manutosh? Manutosh's question is how to market a game application for toddlers 4 to 8 years where the end users are kids, but the decision to install or purchase lies with the parents.
I think you structured the problem fairly well. So when would what are the situations? So again, here's applied psychology that will have to come into picture, right? So, and it will be different. And I'm just throwing some use cases at you so that you start understanding how you have to look at it. Because each use case will have a different solution. If it's a mother who's working from home and she's harassed and she's got these toddlers around who are 4 to 8 years old, her biggest problem is going to be how does she keep them preoccupied while doing something useful, but also being interested so that they don't keep disturbing her while she's working. So value proposition is very different. It could be a housewife who's free, but she has a very precocious child who keeps asking a lot of questions and she doesn't have answers. So usually what mothers will do, parents will do is put him in front of a TV so that he watches Animal Planet or he watches some other children's channel and stops bothering them. So you'll have to define your customer segments and you'll have to do small tests to understand what is your market really like, which is the biggest segment. So usually this is done through A/B testing, figuring out what will drive influencers, which are parents, to take decisions on behalf of their children. Or it could be a parent who really wants their children, child is also serious and parents see a lot of talent in him and they want him to learn. So puzzles and learning games will become much better things to work on. So it really depend on, the market is very wide and it has segments which will behave differently. You'll have to do segmentation, understand which is the best segment for you given what you're doing and go after that. And you use A/B testing to figure that out.
Ravi, if I can, Jagdish here.
Yeah, Jagdish, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, hearing some of this, the whole growth hacking thing, like you're saying, it needs specialist skills and, talked about that. Like this example that was stated, or even earlier, some few examples. So if this person is like right now a specialist in understanding the customer, which are kids, and knows what toys he thinks that they would like, and that's his specialization area, can a thing like growth hacking actually be outsourced, where the person who's doing this business, he's aware of the questions to ask through coaching, through you, and seeing these sessions, but he doesn't actually physically specialize in marketing. He doesn't specialize in growth hacking. can he outsource it to, say, another company, I think you mentioned on the call, which was, say, marketing analytics, and they can actually tell you the different channels available and suggest strategies on which channel might be optimal for you for a fee. So can growth hacking actually be a subscription-based service that a business that focuses on its core competency of the product and service that it wants to build?
Jagdish, very good question.
Or should they have, or does he himself need to specialize in marketing, which is very time intensive, and or hire people from marketing, which is then, might be more expensive than outsourcing it. So your thoughts on that will help, Ravi, I think probably to the group also.
Very good question, Jagdish, and thanks for asking this. So I have a question for you guys. So is growth hacking new, or growth hackers have always existed? And if they have existed, where do we find them? Anybody from the group? Sudeep, let me know if somebody types an answer in chat.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I
growth
think.
Always...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they were always existed, and we can find them by their influence. Means if somebody has influence and they know the market properly, then I think they can help us to get the growth actually.
Let me change my question. My question was not explicit enough. Have growth hackers existed before 2000?
Yes.
Where were they? Or have they existed before 1990? When internet was not even there?
Yes, they were there.
Who were they? Where would we? Which industry would we find them in?
No, actually, I think that was means each business was helping their own business to grow actually. So they were knowing the industry properly, and they were analyzing the things, how the customer feedback and how the customer is behaving and all those things, like Hindustan Unilever. So they have found that how the product is getting sold and at what place, and how the customer
Very good. Very good. Those people were existing in advertising companies.
Yes.
They still exist in advertising companies. You find phenomenal campaigns which are based on applied psychology, which become very successful. I mean, my favorite is Move Cream. You go watch Move Cream ads on YouTube, and you'll be amazed how nobody talks about what the product is, what are its ingredients, what are its benefits, but they tell you a beautiful emotional story which makes you aware about Move and gives you a totally different emotional feeling. So guys, the challenge, Jagdish, has been that people who are good at it are very expensive. And these advertising companies have big charges which startups can't afford. And unfortunately, digital marketing companies are not marketing companies, they are marketing operations companies. If you have a marketing strategy in place and you've figured out what channels to do work on, so I would say, I mean, if you give me the liberty to say this, digital marketing companies today are your media planners from the advertising industry. They are not the advertising companies. They are not the brand advertising companies. They're not the brand building companies. They're not product marketing companies. They are media planning companies. They'll tell you, okay, if this is the customer, this is what you want to do. Okay, here's this media that you should publish on. This is what this media will cost you. So many impressions will do this for you. They'll give you media performance information. Therefore, it becomes extremely important. See, two elements are very necessary. The founder must understand his customer domain very, very well. He must understand his customer's buttons very well. And he will need a coder. This is the minimum. There are enough analytics tools available which he can use online. Some are free, some are paid for subscriptions. Google Analytics is there. If you're building your website on WordPress or on Wix or any such platform, they will give you analytics. And initially, you don't need some fancy analytics. You need very simple, what we call activation and conversion numbers. Activation, usage, and conversion numbers. So therefore, the entrepreneur must build a really good understanding of his customer base. That question about toys that has come, I'm not even sure if the entrepreneur has thought the way we pointed out. You look at segmentation from different perspectives, look at mother's behavior, look at father's behavior, look at child's behavior, look at these things. And these are simple questions to answer. These are not difficult questions. trouble is nobody has taught you critical thinking and problem solving. And these are all critical thinking and problem solving exercises, where you sit down, start detailing it out, start thinking, okay, what question should I ask? What am I looking for? So Jagdish, fortunately, you don't have experts available at the kind of price that startups can afford. So therefore, they have to kind of do this themselves. In our case, we do this with the startups we are coaching, because we realize we can't send them to advertising companies. And we can't tell them, this is going to cost you 1 lakh a month or 2 lakhs a month. That kind of money startups don't have. So I think that is the challenge. So a lot of work the entrepreneur has to do himself, and then if he's taking coaching from us, we can help him create those strategies.
Thank you, Ravi.
So that is my take on it.
Thank you.
Sir, a time check. We are at 12.
I know. So I'm quickly going to skip. So we did this. I'm going to move forward very quickly. Guys, I am sorry, I'm going to skip through this because I don't want to go beyond 12:05 because that's when we started. And so I'm very quickly going to share here with you that you have to be clear about your journey. This curve that I'm showing you is also known as innovation diffusion curve. A lot of guys have written a lot about this on net. And this is pretty much how your market is going to grow. Initially, innovators are going to respond to novelty on your campaigns. Then this will be followed by what we call early adopters, about 13.5%. They look for competitive advantage. And this will be followed by early conservatives who look for benefits. And then finally, 34 conservatives who look for ease of use. Very quickly, this is how your sales is going to grow. And there's a great book written on this by a gentleman called Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm. Pick it up, read about it. Excellent book to read. So what they fundamentally, this book and everything else that diffusion of innovation experts have said, is that from the time you move from visionaries to your main market, there is a big chasm where most startups fail. Why does that happen? Because nature of conversation, nature of need changes. What the customers are looking for changes. And the technology enthusiasts and visionaries form your early market. This is where you will have to focus. This is where you have to grow. The mainstream market is not available to you right now. Unfortunately, that is what you look at and that is what you plan for, and that is how you start spending money. Don't make that mistake. Start looking at technology enthusiasts, guys who will respond to novelty. And then, maybe start looking at visionaries after that. And then once you have succeeded, created traction and growth in early market, then you can attempt to go to your main market. So initially, mainstream market is not where you should focus. And this is where you should actually start doing customer development and start trying out your growth hacking strategies. But actually, you do it even before. There is a stage before customer dev where you're just doing ideating, prototyping, technology creation. You can start doing A/B testing at this stage itself to figure out where does your real market lie. Focus on this as an entrepreneur. And this is completely market-focused business and product development. You don't build the product first and then go to the market. You actually go to the market first, figure out what the market is responding to, and then do product development. This is where B2B, this is where you're going to find your first 100 customers. B2C, you're building an app. This is probably where you're going to find your first 10,000 customers. Everything else beyond this, beyond the chasm, is a growth and scale problem. So you're not there yet if you're an early stage startup. Okay, very quickly, if you do all this, this is the statement you will come out with. This is the value proposition framework, which we use very rigorously. You start with what is the value for the customer, then what market segment will you operate in, then who will you compete with, then what is the key problem solving capability you have, what will your product do, and how is it better. You should be able to write your value proposition in this statement. And the gray text is clearly explained by these boxes that this is what you have to put right there. So use this as a template to define your value proposition. I'm going to skip this. I'm not going to go into details of this right now, out of time. But we do customer acquisition, idea to opportunity workshop where or you can go to any recording, idea to opportunity workshop recording, and this is explained in great details there. All these 3 slides, how do you figure out need? How do you figure out the job? How do you compete? Quickly, metrics. What metrics will matter for you? Quantitative, which is traffic analysis and user engagement. Qualitative, usability testing, session monitoring. Usability is how usable are your engagements. Are customers engaging for more than a minute? Do they spend time on your pages? Are they doing anything out there, or they quit immediately? Then you can do comparative. You want to do tests, so you can do comparative. Fundamental is A/B testing. If you have multiple variables, then multivariate testing, where you can start figuring out what are the clusters, what are the cohorts that you should really be working on. And competitive. You can monitor and track your competitors. There are a lot of tools available online where you can start tracking and finding out what are those guys doing online. So these are the 4 kinds of metrics you should think about. Very quickly, KPIs for startups. Beginning, attraction KPIs, the traffic metrics. Organic, direct, paid, social, start figuring that out. Next level, engagement KPIs. What are the conversions that are happening? How many percentages unlocked key functions? What did they do? Did they give you feedback? Followed by value KPIs. Did they pay? Did they refer? Did they give you a testimonial? Did they subscribe to your newsletter? And retention KPI. What is your churn rate? So ideally speaking, if you can grow your markets net of churn at 5% to 10% per month, you are headed in the right direction. This is for B2B. And if your churn rate is less than 3%, you're headed in the right direction. Then economic metrics. What is your cash flow burn rate? What's your unit economics? What is your customer acquisition cost as against lifetime value? Followed by engagement KPIs and metrics. More web metrics, bounce rate, time on site, then value KPIs and leading metrics. There are multiple metrics out there, guys. Go back to this recording later and you can spend time and understand these parameters. That's it. This is what I wanted to share with you about growth hacking. And if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. We can spend another 10 minutes on that.
Ravi, I had to leave, but thank you and Sudeep very much. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Jagdish, you take care.
Bye.
So, there any questions?
Yeah, Pradeep, where can I get this recording? We will share this link on our YouTube channel, and we'll also share the link. So if you search for Bulletproof Your Startup on YouTube, you'll be able to locate us. And you will also get a link with this recording in a follow-up email and message. All right, I think that's good for today. One new message, what is that? Thanks, Ravi sir, amazing insights. Thanks, Pratap. All right, thanks everybody. Whoever needs any kind of one-on-one support or any questions that you may have to talk to us, you will have the contact details over emails and messages. Please feel free to talk to us and we'll be glad to support you at whatever you have in terms of doubts. All right, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody.
Thank you.